Thank you. I would like to thank the organizers and all of you for the presence here. And I'm really happy that I can start our meeting and debate by introducing you about implementing eIDAS in Poland behind the scenes. That's what I was asked to do by the organizers, but I really like the topic because from the perspective of legislators, when we are talking about decisions, directives, implementing decisions from EU, or actually making everything in practice, this behind the scenes, let us talk about it as a recipe for a dish. First we have the ingredients, and then out of them we prepare a delicious dish. Of course, that's a joke, but what's the most important? Even if we have great ingredients, high quality ingredients, we have some limitations, limited time, or the dish will be eaten by many different people of many different tastes, and we need to prepare the dish that it tastes good to the majority of people who will be eating it. But what about eIDAS regulation? We all know that the key elements that is about trust, security, interoperativity, and cross-border aspect. What is the most important element that was not maybe added but highlighted due to the amendment of eIDAS? So that's the protection of personal data and control over the data. If we look at the preamble to the eIDAS 2 resolution, about 1/3 of it refers to the protection of personal data and full control over it. So that's a very important element that was important to us to add in the regulation. The most important parts of eIDAS 2.0, I think that you all know of them, so I will just review them. That's saying in Latin. What's the most important solutions? A commitment by member states to provide a European digital identity wallet to all individuals and legal entities in the EU. Of course, provide and ensure the operation of registry of wallet trusted parties. Indication of the entities that issue certificates to the relying parties of the portfolio confirming their identity. And one more important element that we will discuss later during the day. So all issues of providing public authentic sources so that they can confirm attributes relating to a wallet user upon request. And I think that's the most important part of the regulation. Reporting certain types of attributes to EU, providing identity matching in domestic services to individuals using electronic means, providing wallet users with the ability to provide qualified electronic signatures free of charge for non-professional use. Soon we are going to listen to the presentation about it, and information obligations to the European Commission associated with the eIDAS provisions. That was the short introduction, but I would like to focus on the legislators' perspective and challenges. If we look at EU regulations, we as Poland have an aim, and we need to introduce provisions relating to the new issues identified in the amended eIDAS regulation to our legal framework. That it doesn't happen directly because regulations are apply directly, but ensuring their application may require changes in the national laws that require identification. We can talk about two things here. So provisions will be important to implement in the national legal framework because EU left some things to be decided by EU member states. And the second group of provisions are the provisions that are not directly associated with the implementation of the EU regulation or using it in practice, but they are essential so that the entire ecosystem can provide the best implementation of the regulation. What are going to be, what are the provisions? I will tell in a second. The second challenge, the next challenge I want to talk about is to locate the national legislation because we need to provide the use of regulation. And if it's realized through creating the new regulation or amending the new act or amendment to many different acts, and we need to ask which act needs to be amended, and that's very important for the provisions, how they are interpreted and adapted, and how they will be perceived in the entire Polish legal framework. Another challenge that we are going to have is the level of complexity of the task higher due to existing national solutions. In terms of eIDAS, it's higher, yes, as I said. Paradoxically speaking, because we already have the Act on e-Citizen, we have already some legal and digital solutions, and it's more difficult, to implement new solutions in the existing system rather than to create everything from scratch, rather than we have an empty space. And the last challenge that is key and the most difficult to implement and raising a lot of controversies is ensuring a balance between the precision of regulation and allowing flexibility to act on it. And I have to admit that as a legal counsel and person working in the legal framework, I have a lot of problems with the fact that people who are responsible for legal protection expect strict regulations of all issues that are associated with data processing. I would even say that these expectations are even like manuals of describing particular processes or the way of how different services operate, but people who are preparing electronic services, broadly speaking, say, no, we cannot be so strict and precise because this over-precision will lead to the fact that we won't be able to be flexible and we won't react in a flexible way to needs of our citizens or needs of EU citizens, so needs of our users, but we won't be able to sufficiently quickly react in the time of threat. When we started our meeting, you said that what matters is cybersecurity, and over-regulation may lead to the lack of this flexible reaction. Of course, on the other hand, we cannot omit issues associated with protection of data, because the main idea of the amendment, eIDAS, was to increase protection of personal data. But I think it's worth to say that from the perspective of our control over our own data, and that's very important in the context of what has already been said today, that what is the most important? We are the most important, not systems. Systems are not important. We people are important because we talk about our identities. Even if it's digital, it is still important because we always refer to the real world, not to digital world. So we need to have a freedom of acting, reacting, sharing our data, or limiting access to our personal data. That's quite a long fragment of my speech, what I said, but I think it's even more important than particular elements that will be implemented in the regulation.
Niemniej, wracając jeszcze na chwilę do kwestii nie tylko systemowych,
eIDAS 2. But what about other challenges of legal counsels and decision makers and legal practitioners? Let's move on to the concept that was adopted when we were developing the project of shared services trust. That is to implement this regulation. As I said before, first of all, we decided what are the issues that need
Tych kwestii oczywiście jest dużo. Ja się starałam tutaj w prezentacji
addressed. I here present the most important ones.
Portfeli może
So
być
we
więcej
may
niż
have
jeden.
more than
Musimy
one wallet.
wiedzieć, jak mają
We
być
need to
zapewnione,
know
więc to
how
jest niewątpliwie kwestia,
they
która
are
wymagała
secured.
uregulowania na
This
poziomie krajowym.
required regulation at the national level. Next, issues associated with the ability of not disclosing the source code of individual components. Next, the ability to provide for proportionate measures to ensure that the free use of qualified electronic signatures by individuals is limited to non-professional purposes. And additional features of European digital identity wallets. We are going to talk about it in detail during our day. Of course, EU also said about some additional means of electronic identification. In Poland, this is also the case, so that requires additional legal provisions. Of course, issues associated with free wallet validation. I know we don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time, but I'm very passionate about that. So it's difficult for me to keep the time regime. Of course, information obligations, national ranges of personal identification data, provide a registry of relying parties, establishing national arrangements for certification. And of course, we need to talk about ensuring an ambiguous matching of individuals' identities in cross-border authentication. I don't think it is well understood by all of you. If you look at the Ministry of Digital Center of Legislation, where there are marks of many different institutions all engaged in the process. This is the issue that raised a lot of emotions. Identification of the public entity that can issue attestation of attributes on behalf of public sector entities. That was very important in terms of procedures and organization. And what also required the intervention was about the public body that could issue attestation of attributes and sector entities responsible for the authentic source and provision establishing national procedure in this regard. I'm not going to talk more about interventions, but to sum up, what acts have been changed. Finally, we decided, after the analysis we performed, how to best, let's say, implement eIDAS 2 in the legal framework. We decided to change 3 acts. I'm not talking about the outcomes, but main 3 acts. For example, application of the amended eIDAS legislation, provision by the Ministry of Information Technology through the national node, and e-citizen regulation was changed. I'm not going to discuss them in details, but we decided to divide this regulation between these 3 acts. We included general systemic issues associated with electric confirmation of attributes, registry of different websites, directory of public entities, so all these systemic elements. The Act on Digital Identity, e-citizen for officials, and catalog of public entities, KPP, that is also realized simultaneously in different acts. Act, but here this is important for the identification of entities that should be in the trusted websites, and eCitizen Act that raised a lot of emotions and a lot of questions and controversies at the moment when the first draft of the act was made public for public consultations, because, as I said before, paradoxically speaking, we have eCitizen, we have this application, but the philosophy of EU identity, digital identity wallet is a bit different. So the task that was the most important one, besides, of course, implementing all these requirements that stem from the regulation related to the European digital identity wallet provided by the Ministry of Digital Affairs, the most important was the fact that our goal was to provide, on one hand, transparency and possibility of continuous use of the services by citizens. So thank you for your attention, and I hope that the debates about technical details will help you understand the Act better, and that will be the response to your needs. Thank you very much.